Boker Tov. Boker Tov. Those who didn't receive the page, there's the last table. It has a very interesting title. Where's the comma? Where's the comma? But not where's the bubba. Where's the comma? No. If you're learning Daf Yomi, you're way beyond bubba comma and finishing up bubba matzia, and you'll be up to the last of the bubba mices in bubba batra. Right. My wife says this is impossible, but she's still plugging at it. So as usual, the shurim are dedicated in memory of Elisheva Frist, Zechuna Livracha, Elisheva Sima, Bat Zalman. I'd also like to mention the first yard site of Yitzchak Halevi Staum, Mrs. Staum's husband, who passed away just a year ago, and her daughter had the good fortune of marrying my younger brother just a few weeks ago on Lag BaOmer, and they should all be happy, and there should be simcha in the family. Grammar, not a popular subject for any of us in school, and especially in the Limudei Kodesh department. I'll just say that when I grew up in the States, so we had Jewish studies and secular studies. Here they call them Limudei Kodesh and Limudim Klaliyim, general studies. But in my yeshiva in Chashmonaim, we didn't do that. We had Limudei Kodesh, and that included biology and chemistry and math and geography and history and language and literature. And then we had Limudei Kodesh Kodashim, and that was Tanakh and Mishnah and Gemara and Machshevet Yisrael, Jewish thought. So nothing was secular. Everything was Kodesh. And that was an attitude that we wanted the students to understand, that you can, as I studied by great people like the Rav Zechron Livracha and Rav Moshe Tendler Zatzal, that through the God's works of nature and laws of nature, you can discover a Kadosh Baruch Hu as well. And that's therefore even the study of the sciences, mathematics, it's all Kodesh. There's nothing choil about this world. And the Rav Kook Zatzal said that while we divide the world into Kodesh v'chol, as we say on Motzei Shabbat, Hamavdil bin Kodesh v'chol, he said it's actually a havdalah between Kodesh and potential Kedusha. He says anything that's not yet chol is waiting for a draft call into the world of Kedusha, and that's really our task. So when we studied Limudei Kodesh in the morning in our yeshivot, and the Rebbe came up with a Rashi that dealt with digduk, with grammar, he usually skipped it because he himself didn't know the laws of the grammar, and therefore he just didn't bother with it, and so on, which of course was a colossal mistake. I remember hearing from the Rav, he would talk about grammarians like Ibn Jinach. Forget about Ibn Ezra, which is on the page in the Mikraot Gedolot, and so many people didn't look at it because he spent so much time on grammar. But nevertheless, the grammatical rules are of extreme importance to put the pasuk in its right place and then give us the proper understanding of the pasuk. Occasionally in our SIDDUR, there are differences of opinion where we are to place the comma, and that's not just a bland machloket, neutral machloket. It makes a world of a difference how we are to understand the pasuk. So, but just to get into it, I'll just say a word of the Gemara says that we're supposed to begin a shir sometimes with a comment of humor, just to put everybody into the proper mood. There is an old story said about a Hasidic Rebbe who said something about this week's parsha, Bahalotcha. It says Bahalotcha Tanai wrote. So the Rebbe said, why does the word Bahalotcha end with the letter Chet? Because it's a remez to the 8 days of Hanukkah. So a Chassid quickly says, 1 second, it's not a Chet, it's a Chav Sofit. So the Rebbe says, you kaifa apikairis, you're studying Digduk. Now you have to understand the background. Every joke has a background, has some kernel of truth. That the maskilim of 200 years ago, they spent a lot of time on Tanakh and on grammar, and therefore there was a knee-jerk reaction in the world of Torah. We're not going to touch it. And that's why the study of Tanakh was neglected, was literally neglected. And the one who has a big chelik in Olam Haba for restoring the study of Tanakh to its proper place, Hechzira to Atara Liyoshna, was Nechama Leibovitz. And she really, really put it back on the agenda. And then certain yeshivot, like Yeshivat Har Etzion, with great people like Rav Yoel Ben Nun, Rav Yaakov Meidan, and others, Rav Mordechai Breuer, I mean, they restored Tanakh to its original glory in terms of being a serious limud, a serious study, no different than studying Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfot. So the study of Dikduk becomes very, very, very important. And we see this in Kriyat Torah. Now sometimes, our Rebbe the Rav was a very big machmer, very strict, that not only should the words be correct, but also we call in Yiddish the trup, the ta'amim, the musical cantillation of the reading of the Torah should be correct. And if you make a mistake, you have to repeat, the Baal Koreh has to be told to repeat the pasuk or repeat the word. Now, thank God, none of us have that chumrah, that strict, because we'd still be in shul on Shabbos, correcting the Baal Koreh, because very few Balei Kriya get it right 100% every single time. Beseda, and most Gabaim don't bother correcting for a mistake in a trup. As long as the words are correct, that's going to be good enough. The Rav was relaxed that strictness only for one occasion, for a bar mitzvah boy. Because if the bar mitzvah boy is going to be corrected time and again with his mistakes in the trup, the one who's going to be embarrassed is the grandmother. And therefore the Rav was careful about the kvod habriyot of the grandmother, and he just let it go. He just let it go. And there's so much to be understood by that in itself, where the Rav was careful about the trup, but what was more important was not to have somebody embarrassed, and so on. So just take a look at source number 1 and source number 2 and source number 3. In all three phrase psukim, you have Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. And the question is, how do you read it? Vayikra b'Shem Hashem or Vayikra b'Shem Hashem? You say, what's the difference? Well, in the first, it's Avram Avinu. Vayatek misham hara mikedem lebeit el vayet ohalo beit el miyam vaya mikedem. Vayiven sham mizbeach l'Hashem. Avram Avinu builds an altar to God. Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. And he calls out in the name of God, which means he's publicizing the fact that there is one God in this world. And as the Ramban tells us on this pasuk in Parshat Lech Lecha, Avram Avinu, he doesn't use the phrase, but I heard this from Rav Lichtenstein. He says Ramban saw Avram Avinu as the Lubavitcher, setting up a booth at the airport, at the bus terminal, at a major crossroad. That's what the Ramban said. At major crossroads, he set up these tents, these booths, and anybody was coming by in any direction, he was spreading the word of monotheism. Vayikra, what was he calling out? B'Shem Hashem. So, and that's repeated in the second source, and this is about Yitzchak. Vayiven Sham Mizbeach, Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. Now, how do I know to read it like that? Because the trup, if you look at the first source, and here we have the printed ta'amim, it's a tipcha mercha sof pasuk, Vayiven Sham Mizbeach l'Adonai, Vayikra B'Shem Adonai. That's how it's supposed to be read. Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. In the second two, it's Vayiven Sham Mizbeach, Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. Pashta Zakev Katan. So that's the way the trup teaches us how to pause in the proper place and connect in the proper place. B'Shem Hashem is connected in both sources 1 and 2. But in source 3, where Moshe Rabbeinu is being taught by a Kadosh Baruch Hu the 13 attributes, the Shlosh Esrei Midot, Vayered Hashem be'anan, a Kadosh Baruch Hu descends upon the mountain, Vayityatzei v'Mosham, and is as if he's standing before God, for Moshe, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem, and he calls out the name. Which name does he call out? Yud Kei Vav Kei. And this is like the beginning to Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun. So it has to be read, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. And if the Baal Koreh reads it wrong, and we read this pasuk on a Ta'anit Tzibur, a public fast day, both for Shacharit and Mincha, not only on Shabbat Parshat Ki Tisa, but it's also read on Shabbat Chol HaMoed. So this pasuk is read several times over during the year. The Baal Koreh has to get it right. Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. and he has to get it right in Lech Lecha and in Toldot with regard to Avraham Avinu, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. And if he gets it wrong in any of these places, it has to be repeated. Why? He's saying the right words, but because he put the comma in the wrong place, the meaning, the understanding is very, very different. And it's tantamount to saying the wrong word in Kriyat Torah, which everybody agrees you have to correct the Bal Koreh if he gets the wrong word. There are some who will lighten up on that too, as long as if it doesn't change the basic meaning of the pasuk, some won't even correct on a word that's wrong. And certainly not an et and eight. Sometimes you have these people yell out, et with a segol. Sometimes it's with a tzere, eight. And you know when it's a tzere? When it has its own trup. That's the clue. It has its own trup, it's eight. If it's connected to the next word, it's always et. Now in modern Hebrew, when we say it Havaras Faradit, you'd never in a million years hear the difference between an et and an eight. But in Chutz La'aretz, there's some people who are Hawkeyes, and they sit there and they think there's a big mitzvah to correct. So there's certain things that don't have to be corrected, and et and eight don't have to be corrected. Yeah. Why not? Why not? Here you go. Go to my daughter Ahuva, she'll teach you. Yeah. Right. So they no. The first one is Vayikra. It's a tibcha. Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. What you might have expected is the opposite trop of Vayikra b'Shem, what's called Mercha Tibcha, which is very common in the Chumash, and you'd be reading it then, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. Hashem is sof pasuk, it's the end of the pasuk. So that's not the case. It's a Tibcha, which gives me a comma effect, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. So too in the second source, it's a pashta. The pashta, the trop is always put at the end of the word, but there's no syllable with an aleph. So the last syllable is the resh with the kamatz. It's not Vayikra, but it's Vayikra, and that gives you also a momentary comma. B'Shem Hashem, Zakef Katan go together. So that's how those are read. As opposed to source 3, where it's Mercha Tibcha, Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. That's how it's supposed to be read. Okay, so now I'm telling you, I just give you a biblical example of how important the comma placing is. Now let's look at source 4. Source 4 is a great, Vakasha. Yeah. The third meaning is Vayikra b'Shem. He calls out, he's not teaching us, Moshe Rabbeinu is not being taught that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is there. That was the message of Avraham Avinu. Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. Who's he calling out to? Not in the name of any other deity, but in the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, Shem Hashem. That's Avraham Avinu's teaching. Moshe Rabbeinu is he's already part of the clan. He believes, and we believe. Here, Kadosh Baruch Hu is telling him, Vayikra b'Shem, you will call out with the names such and such and such and such, because the word Hashem at the end of this pasuk kicks off the Shloshes Rei Midot. The next pasuk is Hashem, Hashem, Ke'el Rachum V'Chanun. So the word Hashem in the end of this pasuk is actually an entree to the next pasuk. But he's not teaching him that there's a God in this world. He's teaching him that there are certain names that are going to follow, and it's more than Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's Hashem, Hashem, Ke'el Rachum V'Chanun, and these are the 13 mitot. If you remember the slichot that we say on Yomim Noroim, one of the piyutim is Na Kol Midah Nechona. We ask Kadosh Baruch Hu to pick out the appropriate character, midah, which means we are going to say all of them, Hashem, Hashem, Ke'el Rachum V'Chanun, as we say them repeatedly in the slichas. But we're not sure, we're not attuned to the appropriate midah that would be fitting for particular averot that we have. So we ask Kadosh Baruch Hu to do the job for us, and he should select from the list that I'm now saying, he should pick out the appropriate midah that would be appropriate for our particular list of sins. So we don't know how it functions, so we just say them all. Okay. Now let's look at source number 4. Source 4 is an interesting agadah that's based on a reading of Yehi Shmei Rabbah. All right, so now we hear Kaddish often enough in Shul. So how do we respond when the Chazan says, Ba'agala b'zman kariv imru amen? So do we say, Yehesh me Rabba mevarach le'alam ulomei al maya? Or do we say, Yehesh me Rabba mevarach le'alam ulomei al maya? Do we do it the first way, where the comma is after the fourth word, Yehesh me Rabba mevarach, comma, le'alam ulomei al maya? That what would translate into Hebrew would be, Yehi Shem Hashem mevorach, God's name should be blessed, forever and ever and ever. Me'ata ve'ad olam, in Aramaic, le'alam ulomei al maya, forever and ever. It's a loose translation, but it's a direct translation of me'ata ve'ad olam. So is it that? Is it Yehi Shem Hashem mevorach, comma, me'ata ve'ad olam? Or is it Yehi Shem Hashem, Yehi Shem Hashem, what? And mevarach le'olam. Yehi Shmei Rabba. Yehi Shmei Rabba. Where's God's name there? We don't have it yet. Yehi Shmei Rabba, comma. We don't have to understand what that means. Mevarach le'olam ulomei al maya. That's already a different story. So Tosfot tells us the following story. Tanya. It says Gemara. The Gemara tells us the following story. Tanya. It says in a Braita. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Pam ha'achat hayiti malech baderech. I was once traveling. V'nichnasti lechurva achat michurvot Yerushalayim litpalel. There was a run-down building. A churva means a destroyed building. You want to see a churva, go to Kfar Aza, you'll see a churva. But even sometimes in Yerushalayim, before they do renovations on certain buildings, they look like a churva. There are still some around. That's correct. So he walked into a churva of Yerushalayim to daven. Ba Eliyahu zachur latov. Eliyahu Navi meets him. This is one of the famous Eliyahu Navi stories. And okay, I'm not going to get into, what does it mean that Eliyahu Navi? It could be a human being who gives him this admonition, as we'll see in a moment. And Rabbi Yossi thought this must have been an Eliyahu Navi figure, no different than the tank that came by Kibbutz Sa'ad on the morning of Shabbat Simchat Torah, and the tank wasn't even supposed to be there, and blew away 20 mechablim at the gate of Kibbutz Sa'ad, and that miracle saved Kibbutz Sa'ad, and only later in the war did that tank make its way back to the area, came into Kibbutz Sa'ad, and they called it Tank Eliyahu Navi. Beseda. I'm the last to challenge. With a daughter living in Kibbutz Sa'ad, believe me, I'm the last to challenge that call. So here you have Kamachas. I walked into Yerushalayim, and Eliyahu Navi, Zachur Latov, he was there. V'shamar li ala petach, he guarded the door. Atcha siyamti tfilati. Okay, Vimtili is like a different version of the Gemara. He waited for me. He didn't interrupt me in the middle of my davening until I finished. La'achar shesiyamti tfilati, I completed davening. He said, Amar li, Shalom alecha Rabbi. Shalom aleichem. V'amarti lo, and I responded, Shalom alecha Rabbi Umari. Okay, whoever you are, V'amar li, and he said to me, B'ni, my son, Mipnei man nichnasta lichurva zu. Why did you go in here? Amarti lo, I said, Litpalel, to daven. V'amar li, and he said, Hayalacha litpalel baderach. Who asked you to go into a churva? You should have davened while you were traveling. Amarti lo, I said, Mityarei hayiti shema yafsiku bi ovrei drachim. People, passerbyers, are going to interrupt me. Therefore, I wanted some silence and some anonymity. V'amar li, Hayalacha litpalel tefillah k'tzara. You could have davened outside, and there's a concept called an abbreviated tefillah. You could have done that if you were worried that a regular long Shmoneh Esrei is going to cause you to be interrupted by passerbyers. B'ota sha'ah, in that moment, lamadati mimenu shlosha dvarim. I learned 3 lessons from this Eliyahu Navi figure. 1, lamadati she'ein nichnasim l'churva. Not a good idea to walk into the churva, into this destroyed building. Lamadati shemitpalalim baderech, that you can daven baderech, on the way. V'lamadati, and I learned shamitpalel baderech mitpalel tefillah k'tzara, that when you're on the road, you can abbreviate your davening. V'amar li, and then this Eliyahu Navi figure continues. B'ni, my son, ma kol shamata b'chur v'azot. Did you hear anything interesting? Any vague sounds while you were in there? Amarti lo, yeah. Shamati bat kol, I heard a heavenly voice. Sheminanamet kiyonah. It's like yawning like a pigeon. Ve'omeret, and saying, Oy lebanim shabavonotehem hechrafti et beiti. Oy nebuch, to the children who because of their sins I had to destroy my house. V'sarafti et heichali, and I burnt my heichal, which is Beit Mikdash. V'higleitim leveina umot, and I caused them exile amongst the nations. Somehow this heavenly voice was there. Ve'amar li, and the Eliyahu Navi figure said to me, Chayecha v'chayei roshecha. It's like a phrase of an oath of sorts. You'd say in English, my God, Lo sha'azul buvad omeret kach. Not only for one moment does this bat kol, this heavenly voice, come out and speak. Ele b'chol yom v'yom shalosh pamim. 3 times a day, this heavenly voice is saying this, what you just heard. V'lo zul buvad, and not only that, ele b'sha'ash Yisrael nichnasim lebatei knesiot lebatei midrashot. And every time Am Yisrael goes into a shul or beit midrash, and they respond, Yehei Shmei Hagadol Mivorach, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Minanea Rosho, God, as if to say, is moving his head, Va'omer, Ashrei HaMelech Shemekalsin Oto Beveito Kach, worthy is the king who gets praised in his house, in his palace, in such a way. Yehei Shmei Hagadol Mivorach, but Ma Lo Le'av, Oy Nebuch, for the father, Shehigla et Banav, that sent his children to exile. V'oy lahem levanim shegalu me'al shulchan avehem. Oy, for a father that throws his children out from the table of the parents, from the parental table. This is a fascinating Gemara. Fascinating. And basically is saying that a Kadosh Baruch Hu hasn't given up on Am Yisrael. Because if a Kadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't be doing this, then we would have lost hope of ever returning. And it's dafka because Kadosh Baruch Hu, for 2,000 years, is constantly bemoaning the fact that he had to unfortunately throw us out of the country and throw us out of his house, means that he's yearning for Am Yisrael to come back. That's the story here. Just one little fine point before we get to the Yehei Rabbah, Yehei Hagadol Mivorach, which is just a translation of Yehei Rabbah Mivorach. Yehei Rabbah. Rabbah is Gadol, Mivorach. I just want to say something about the difference between Melech and Av. The last line, Ashrei HaMelech Shemekalsin Oto Beveito. When is a Kadosh Baruch Hu the Melech? When there's a Beit HaMikdash up and running. And when is he a father figure? After the Churban. And the Rav gave a whole drasha about this. You can read this in Ala Tshuva. I was at the shir where we talked about that a Kadosh Baruch Hu in Beit HaMikdash is Melech. B'chatzatrot v'kol shofar hariyu lifnei hamelech Hashem. And what Rabbi Akiva was saying at the end of Masechet Yoma, Omer Rabbi Akiva, Ashreichem Yisrael lifnei mi atem mitaharim umi mitaheretchem. Worthy is Am Yisrael. Wow, you know who we receive kapara from? Avichem shebashamayim, our Father in heaven. What's the big news here? Who did you think we're going to get kapara from? What Rabbi Akiva was saying was that after the destruction, HaKadosh Baruch Hu switched phases from phase king to phase father, the father image. And that's why in Slichot we say, Kerachem Av al Banim. Because a father, with regard to a Melech, you have to have the proper protocol to stand before him. He has to have an agenda, and you have to be dressed properly, and you can't just walk in, and so on. But a son to a father, you don't even have to knock on the door. It's like, to a certain degree, as ironic as it sounds, because of the Churban, the destruction, we ended up with a little bit of a closer connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu as Avichem Shebashamayim. And here, this particular Agadat Chazal mirrors that idea. Ashrei HaMelech Shemekalsin Oto Beveito, in his house with Beit HaMikdash, Ma lo le'av shehigla et banav. Galut, now our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's father. Okay, Atkan, the Agadah. But let's focus on the Yehei Shmei Hagadol Mevorach and the Balei HaTosfot. I remember in the yeshivas they used to say, Tosfot says in singular. There's no Mr. Tosfot. Mr. Tosfot doesn't ask, he doesn't answer, right? Tosfot fragt, Tosfot asks, Tosfot answers, and for Tosfot, I mean, who's Mr. Tosfot? The Tosafot are the Chachmei Ashkenaz of almost 200 years, from right after Rashi. Most of the Balei HaTosafot lived in the generation of 2 generations after Rashi. Rashi's grandson, Rabbeinu Tam, and his name wasn't Tommy, it was Rabbeinu Yaakov, and he was called affectionately by his students in the words of Parshat Toldot, V'Yaakov ish Tam Yoshev Ohalim. So the original writings of Rabbeinu Tam were Rabbeinu Yaakov ish Tam. They referred to him affectionately in the name of Yaakov Avinu, Yaakov ish Tam, and then because of copyists who had to condense as much as possible, so Rabbeinu Yaakov ish Tam became Rabbeinu Tam. And it's like Rabbeinu Tam. And that's who he was. And his brother, who is the Rivam, Rabbeinu Yitzchak ben Meir, Rabbeinu Tam was Rabbi Yaakov ben Meir. Meir was the son-in-law of Rashi. Rashi only had daughters. And the other famous son-in-law was Rashbam, Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir, who was a commentator on Chumash. So that generation are Balei HaTosfot, the main ones. And then there was the Rabbeinu Yitzchak HaZaken. And then there was a few others, and then some came later. So Tosfot is a compilation of about 200 years. The one who wrote about it extensively was Professor Ephraim Elimelech Urbach, very fat book called Balei HaTosafot. And then the Rav son, Professor Chaim Soloveitchik, also wrote extensively on the Balei HaTosafot. And a contemporary of mine from YU, Rabbi Professor Karnafogel, he used to be a rabbi in Teaneck, and then went into academics at Stern College at YU. He wrote also extensively on the Balei HaTosafot. So the Tosfot said the following on this Agadah. Ve'onim yehei shmei hagadol mavrach. Source number 5 at the bottom. Mikan yesh listor. From this Gemara we can contradict ma shepirshu b'machzor vitri. Yehei shmei Rabba. Kama. What does that mean? Who's the machzor vitri? So today we call a SIDDUR a book of tefillot for every day, and a machzor for seasonal tefillot. A machzor for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, a machzor for Yom Tov, and so on. But in the Middle Ages, SIDDUR and machzor were synonymous. So a machzor was also a SIDDUR. And Vitry was a town in France, and the machzor Vitry was a SIDDUR that was put together by students of Rashi. Well known by the other Balei HaTosafot, and they are coming now to argue with what's written in the Machzor Vitry. Because in the Machzor Vitry it says, Yehei Shmei Rabba Kama. And what is the meaning? The meaning is very exciting, by the way. It means as follows. Shezu tefillah she'anu mitpallim. It's a tefillah that we would be saying, Sheyemalei Shmo, that God's name should become complete. As it says in Parshat Bishalach, Ki yad al kes ya, kaf samach, not kisei, kaf samach aleph, and yud and hey, not yud hey, vav and hey. Something truncated, something missing about the name of Hashem. She'lo yehei shmo shalem, God's name, and his kis'o, his throne won't be shalem, complete, ad sheyimche zaro shel Amalek, until the final elimination of Amalek. Which means, as long as there's an Amaleki out there trying to hurt and harm and kill Am Yisrael, it's a chilul Hashem. It means that God's name is incomplete. That's a chilul Hashem. And we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, according to the Machzor Vitry, to say the following, Uperusho kach, Yehei Shmei. What is Shmei? It's an abbreviation of 2 words, Shin Mem, shame, and Yud Hey, which is incomplete, should become Rabbah, should become complete once again. I'm telling you, in light of October 7th, this is a very important tefillah. Except that the Balei HaTosafot said, we don't say that. He says that this is the meaning of what they said in the Machzor Vitry. Yehei Shmei, Yehi Shem Yud Hey, Rabbah should become great and complete once again. That's tefillah number 1. And there's something else there. And it should also be not only today, but it should go on forever and ever and ever. Fine. Why does Tosfot reject this beautiful reading of the Yesh Me Rabbah, because you said the Medrash in source number 4, 3 lines from the end, said, Yehesh Me Rabbah, Yehish Me Hagadol, Mivorach. So you see that the word Mivorach is actually linked to the first 3 words. And therefore, Tosfot goes on to tell us something else. That Yesh Me Rabbah Mivorach, as most of us do say it like that, Yesh Me Rabbah Mivorach, Kama, Le'olam Olmei Al-Maya, means that Yish Shem Hagadol Mivorach, that Kadosh Baruch Hu's name should become known, well-known, publicized all over the world. And that is an expression of Vaya Hashem lemelech hakol haaretz bayomahu yeh Hashem echad shmo echad, which means it's essentially a tefillah for Yemot HaMashiach. So I would say the first version, which is the Machzavitri, Yehi Shem Hashem, Yesh Me Rabbah, Kama, it's a tefillah that the Amaleki nation should be ended. Finally. Obviously, it's messianic, no doubt. But that's the direct tefillah. The tefillah that Tosfot opts, Yesh Me Rabbah Mevarach, is a tefillah that Kadosh Baruch Hu's awareness should be universally accepted, which is really the extension of Avram Avinu's mission in life. Vayiven Sham Mizbeach, Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. So he starts out with a few intersections, but we're interested not just a few intersections in the highway. We're interested in the universal acceptance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's Yehi Shem Hashem Mavarach Me'ata V'Olam. Yesh Me Rabbah Mavarach Le'alam Olmei Al-Maya. That's the way most of us say. Now, sometimes in shul, you can hear people who scream out Yesh Me Rabbah loud. They go, Yesh Me Rabbah Mavarach Le'olam Olmei. I've heard it. There are people who still say it that way, and it's not wrong. You see that Tosfot is giving us the source, the Machzavitri, Talmidim of Rashi, who so said the Yesh Me Rabbah in Kaddish. Except that Tosfot said, from the Agadah, with the Eliyahu Navi story, you get the idea that that's not the right way to say it. The right way to say it, or let's just say the more correct way to say it. There's no such thing as a wrong way here. The more correct way to say it would be Yesh Me Rabbah Mevarach Kama. So I cite this as a very interesting example of where the comma in the Yesh Me Rabbah makes all of the difference in terms of what we are saying in Kaddish. All right, let's get to the next page. Second side, source number 6. Source number 6 is in the bracha of Ritzei that we say every day 3 times a day in Shmoneh Esrei. Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu b'amcha Yisrael u'b'tfilatam. It's the bracha before Moedim. It begins the last section of the Tfilat Amidah, whether it's weekday, Shabbat, Yom Kippur, makes no difference. The last 3 brachot are Ritzei, Moedim, and Sim Shalom, which essentially, Sim Shalom, is a response to Birkat Kohanim. It's even called Birkat Kohanim by name in the Mishnayot of Masechet Rosh Hashanah, because Sim Shalom is a response that we just read the Birkat Kohanim last Shabbat, and Sim Shalom Tovah Bracha. The response is to Yevarechecha. Sim Shalom Tovah Uvracha. It's a responding to Yevarecha. Ki ba'or panecha natata lanu Hashem Elokeinu Torat Chayim is a response to Ya'er Hashem Panav Elecha. V'tov beinecha levarecha tamcha Yisrael b'cholet v'chosha b'shlomecha is a response to V'yasem Lecha Shalom. So that's why the Rav explained once in Nusach Ashkenaz, where there's no duchening, no Birkat Kohanim by Mincha, we don't say Sim Shalom, but we have a little bit of an abbreviated tefillah, Shalom Rav Ayisol Amcha Tasim Lo'olam. Except that on Mincha of a public fast day, where there is Birkat Kohanim, even in Nusach Ashkenaz, we say Sim Shalom. So that, because it's a response to Birkat Kohanim. So you have, Ritzei begins this section of Hodaya. And it says, Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu b'amcha Yisrael b'tfilatam. Now here comes the question. V'hashev et ha'avodah l'dvir beitecha. We ask God He should restore. Dvir is a nickname of the Beit HaMikdash. We ask Kadosh Baruch Hu to restore the service to Beit HaMikdash. V'ishei Yisrael. What does that mean? The fire of Israel. And then it continues, utfilatam and kabel b'ratzon. The God should accept our prayer, our tfilah. Now, tfilah, I understand. We're davening, so we're asking Kadosh Baruch Hu to accept our tfilah. Where does Ishei Yisrael factor in here? Is it part of the avodah lidvir beitecha? Should it be read, V'ashev et avodah lidvir beitecha v'ishei Yisrael? We ask Kadosh Baruch Hu to restore the activity, the service in the Beit HaMikdash, including the korbanot, the fire of Israel, which be a reference to the korbanot, the sacrifices, or is it V'ashev et avodah lidvir beitecha? God should restore Beit HaMikdash, comma, v'ishei Yisrael utfilatam v'avat kabel bratzon. God should accept our tefillah together with the Ishei Yisrael. So what's the Ishei Yisrael if it's not the korbanot? So the Rav said, there are still korbanot today. Not animal sacrifices in Beit HaMikdash, but it's our mesirut nefesh, our dedication, self-sacrifice for being Jewish. And there are many sacrifices. And in every generation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu demands different types of sacrifices. So today, the sacrifices are on the battlefield. They are big sacrifices for being Jewish here in Eretz Israel. In Columbia University, they have different level of sacrifices. They have to stand up for being Jewish on a university campus in America. Okay, I'm not here to judge, the different levels of sacrifice. There's a level of sacrifice in Chutz La'aretz for Torah education. It costs a lot of money. Send kids to yeshiva. And because of that, the average Jewish family size is smaller than here in Eretz Israel. That's not an accident. That's planned. That's planned. We all know that. And as my brother from Teaneck used to say, that the most successful form of birth control is yeshiva tuition. It sounds funny, but it's a fact. Even, and by the way, this has been studied, even in the Dati Haredi community, where in the Haredi community there might be larger families perhaps than a modern Orthodox family, the Haredi family of somebody studying in Lakewood Yeshiva is smaller than his parallel studying in the Ponevezh Yeshiva in Bnei Brak. It's across the board. It's a full child plus smaller in Chutz La'aretz than here. And if you look at the demography of the United States Jewish community across the board, all types of Jews who identify as Jews in any way or manner, it's 1.6 Jewish children per Jewish family, which is under the 2 line. The 2 line is the 0 line, means less than, if you want to grow, you have to have at least a 3rd child. You have to be more than 2, because 2 is 2 children replacing 2 parents. Once it's under the 2 line, the nation is shrinking. So in the United States, the Jewish people are shrinking. And that's why they've redefined who's Jewish. Patrilineage, if the father's Jewish, the mother's not, so they're also Jewish. The Pew Report counts all kinds of people who are not halachically Jewish as part of the Jewish people. Hey, we're staying the same. We still have the same 6 million Jews in America. It's not true. It's not true. There are less than 5 million Jews in America who are halachically Jewish. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe at the end of his life spoke about 3 million Jews. And people thought, what happened? That he understood that Woody Allen Jews aren't really Jews any longer. They're not Jews any longer. Madeleine Albright was not part of the statistics in the Lubavitcher Rebbe's eyes of being Jewish, even though she finds out late in life that her maternal grandmother was Jewish. But she didn't say it. But she wasn't the Belzer Chassid. That's for sure not. And those type of Jews, it's just another generation, and they're goyim. Mamish goyim. We know that because of intermarriage and assimilation and so on. So the Ishei Yisrael, the one here, 1930s, Jews who migrated to the States, it was Mesirut Nefesh to keep Shabbat. It was Mesirut Nefesh to keep Shabbat because they lost their jobs if they didn't show up on Shabbat. So that was big Mesirut Nefesh. Today, it's no big Mesirut Nefesh to keep Shabbat. It's no big Mesirut Nefesh because you can do everything on Sunday. You can do everything on Monday and on Tuesday. So you're going to miss a ball game on Shabbat? You go on Tuesday night to the ball game. It's not a big deal. And in Kashrut once upon a time was tremendous Mesirut Nefesh, and it cost, who knows, it was astronomically high prices of kosher food. Today, the gap between kosher food and non-kosher food, no big difference. When you go to a supermarket in the United States And there are 225 symbols of kashrut in the United States. Now, some are just very local, very, very local. Shamshul Rabbi gives a hechsher on a pizza shop in his neighborhood, and he makes a symbol. Fine. But I'm talking about the big ones and so on, and some that are statewide. So the product that has the hechsher against the product doesn't have the hechsher, there's no discernible difference in the price any longer. It's just another thing on the I saw a documentary here in Israel 20 years ago, and they did on kashrus in America, and they showed this company in Texas that made potato chips, and it had hechsher, one of the hechsherim, fine. It was owned by a Ku Klux Klan member. So they asked him, they said, Ku Klux Klan, why do you have a hechsher on the potato chips? So he said, without batting an eyelash, he says, you know, killing Jews is one thing, but selling it to them is something else. He didn't understand the question. Right. Then it's pure. Right. For sure. So V'yishei Yisrael is the Mesirat Nefesh of every generation's Jews. And we ask Kadosh Baruch Hu to take it into consideration with our tefillot. Even though there's no Beit HaMikdash, there's still Yishei Yisrael. And this, if you open up your Siddurim later, you will see that some Siddurim have the comma after V'yishei Yisrael, that it should be read, Vashevet Avodah Levi V'techa V'yishei Yisrael, comma, which means it's korbanot with Beit HaMikdash, or it's Vashevet Avodah Levi V'techa, comma, V'yishei Yisrael Utfilatam. And you'll notice that in the Rinat Yisrael Siddur, there's a difference between the Ashkenaz and the Sfard where they put the comma. Okay? And there's some Siddurim that opted not to decide, and they put the comma in both places, which means they got it wrong. So these two possibilities are in Tosfot in Masechet Menachot, source number 6. If you look at the third line from the bottom, where it says, V'hainu damrinan b'shmonesrei ba'avodah. Source number 6, the third line. This is what we say in Shmonesrei in the bracha called avodah, which is Ritzei. V'yishei Yisrael utfilatam mehera ba'avat kaber bratzon. Yesh omrim, and some say that the Yishei Yisrael ve'koi ad goes on what we just said before, Vashevet avodah v'vitecha v'yishei Yisrael. Which means Tosfot is bringing both readings here, and it's our nusach change to say it this way or that way. I prefer the nusach v'yishei Yisrael utfilatam, that I want a Kadosh Baruch Hu to take a look at our Mesirat Nefesh with our tefillah. Then we have a fighting chance that a Kadosh Baruch Hu will acknowledge our tefillah. But you see, it's the psik, it's the comma that makes all the difference as to what two words, Yishei Yisrael. Now, it's not Anshe, it's Ish, the word Eish, because the word fire. Right? No, but it means the fire of Israel. No, it means Eish. It means the fire of Israel. It means the fire, the enthusiasm. That's what it means. It means Eish. It means fire. But the question is, where's the fire? Either it's the fire on the Mizbeach, or it's our burning fire, L'man Hashem. No, it's Eish. Okay, one last word on Yishei Yisrael. There are some Siddurim in the world that decided not to put the commas before and after as to not to decide, but to strike it from the record completely and not say Yishei Yisrael. Those are the Siddurim from the Rabbinical Assembly of the Jewish Theological Seminary in America, of the conservative movement. And that is because they refuse to acknowledge that there will be a restoration of Korbanot in Beit HaMikdash time, and they simply push the delete button on the two words Yishei Yisrael, so they don't have to decide. Just as they did with the Musaf. If you look at Tfilat Musaf in the Rabbinical Assembly Tfilah, so how do we say Musaf? What is Musaf, if not the Korban of the day, right? And so on. Every time we have a Yom Tov, we read the Korban of the day that we just read a few minutes earlier in Maftir from Parshat Pinchas. And that's what we say in Musaf. And we acknowledge, we declare, V'sham na'aseh lefanecha. We say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nechataynu galinu me'atzeinu v'drachachnu me'alataynu. And so on. We don't have Beit HaMikdash, but we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to restore it. And we say, V'sham na'aseh lefanecha et korbanot chavoteinu temidim kisidram musafim kilchatam. Na'aseh, we will. open up a conservative siddur. It says, Visham asu lefanecha. We once upon a time brought these. It's 100% correct as a historic report, but that's not what Musaf is. The davening of Musaf is a hineni muchanum zuman, readiness to do it once again. And therefore, if it's not in the future, it's worthless. It's a bracha levatala. The whole thing is a bracha levatala. So that's the whole Musaf. And in the other tefillot, they simply deleted the Yishei Yisrael so as to not to get involved in this whole controversy of whether it means korban or not, and so on. But that's, yeah. Let's put it this way. The Rambam is not clear. The Rambam in his Moreh Nevuchim offers a historic reason for korban, that it was a concession to the reality of the day, because this is what Bnei Yisrael saw in Mitzrayim and in general. What was religion? It was bringing korbanot, and therefore a religion without korbanot, there would be a revolt. And so Kadosh Baruch Hu said, all right, you want korbanot, but do it my way. Do it my way, right? Like Frank Sinatra, right? Did it my way. So Kadosh Baruch Hu says, do it my way, my way. Beseder. So if you accept that as being the exclusive reason for korbanot, then it becomes perplexing that in the Messianic days, which Am Yisrael will achieve some type of ideal, spiritual, and reality, that we should be going back to a lower order of service of God, of Avodat Hashem, and the conservatives believe that that's the case. The only thing is that the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah says, "Hamelech HaMashiach atid la'amod lachzir malchut David liyoshna bonei hamikdash makrivim korbanot." He says very clearly that we're going back to korbanot, and he believes that it's part of the world of chukim that we are allowed to explore the rationality behind korbanot, but there might be some reasons that we don't understand. And the fact that the Rambam includes the very two books of Avodah and Korbanot into his 14 books of Mishnah Torah says that they're part of the Torah even in Messianic days. So the idea that there won't be Korbanot, according to the Rambam, I don't think that's the case. You would be able to cite Rav Kook, who suggested that in Yemot HaMashiach we're only going to have Korban Mincha, which is grain offering, and no longer Korban from animal. And he cites the pasuk V'arva Hashem Minchat Yehuda v'Yushalayim, the mincha, the korban mincha, which is a grain offering. But with all this controversy, I fall back on what the Rambam said: Lo yada adam ma yiyu ad shiyu. Nobody knows what's going to happen until it happens. So let's sit back patiently, relax, and when it happens, impatiently, okay. And when it happens, it happens. All right. Source number 7. Source number 7 is the little tefillah in small print that's said by the chazan when there should be duchening Birkat Kohanim, but there is no Birkat Kohanim. Either in Chutz La'aretz, according to Ashkenazim, Sfardim have duchening Birkat Kohanim in Chutz La'aretz every single day, but Ashkenazim don't, and there are various reasons why not. I'll just broadly say, one is that there were those who thought that there is absence of simcha in Chutz La'aretz. Only in Eretz Yisrael we're besimcha. So people say that's like very ironic, because here we're all uptight, and Chutz La'aretz, well, they're uptight there now too. But the simcha doesn't mean gaiety. Simcha means closeness to Kadosh Baruch Hu. And there is no closeness to Kadosh Baruch Hu in Chutz La'aretz. There's only closeness to Kadosh Baruch Hu in Eretz Yisrael, as it says, Tamid Einei Hashem Elokecha Ba Mereshit Hashana Va'ad Acharit Shana. Kadosh Baruch Hu is always focused on Eretz Yisrael here. So that's why there's simcha here. And there was a minhag that developed in the Galil that there would only be Birkat Kohanim for Shabbat and Yom Tov, not in the weekday. Although Rav Shai Yosef Cohen, when he moved up to Haifa in the early 80s, he changed that minhag in the Haifa area because he was a Kohen and he wanted a duchen every day. But he claimed it was a minhag ta'ut, an erroneous minhag. But nevertheless, in Tzfat, in Miron, in Tveria, in the kibbutzim there, they only duchen on Shabbat and not during the weekday. And the Chazal actually believe that there is a difference between the Galil area of Eretz Yisrael, the north, and Yehuda, the center where Beit HaMikdash was. Fine. So you have Birkat Kohanim here in Eretz Yisrael every single day. But if there's no Kohen in Shul, even in Yerushalayim, what do you do? or Chutz La'aretz where there's no duchening. So the Chazan says this tefillah, Elokeinu Elokei Barcheinu Baracham Sholet B'Torah, Haktuva Yedei Moshe Avdecha, Amor Apei Ahron Avanav, Kohanim Kodeshach Amor, Yivrecha Hashem Shemrecha. You don't answer Amen. You say Kein Yehi Ratzon, Kein Yehi Ratzon, Kein Yehi Ratzon. Fine. How do you read this? Elokeinu Elokei. Do you read it Barcheinu Barbracha Hamshuleshet, comma, that Barcheinu Barbracha Hamshuleshet, God should grant us the bracha that's a tripled bracha. Why is it tripled bracha? It comes in three parts. Yivrecha Hashem Shemrecha, Yar Hashem B'Malecha V'Chunecha, Yisa Hashem B'Malecha V'Sevecha Shalom. Where do we know that it's a triple-edged bracha? BaTorah Ktuva Yedei Moshe Avdecha. Open up the Chumash in Parshat Naso. You'll see. So that's one way of reading it. You put the comma after the word Hamshuleshet. Barcheinu Barbracha Hamshuleshet. And some Siddurim have it there. Or is it Elokeinu Elokei Barcheinu Barbracha Hamshuleshet BaTorah, comma, Haktuva Yedei Moshe Avdecha. Now, if that's the case, Hamshuleshet BaTorah, you're going to have to scratch your head and find 3 examples of Birkat Kohanim in the Chumash. It's only once. It's only in Parshat Naso. Yes and no. In Parshat Shmini, we're told at the inauguration of the Mishkan, Ahron raises his hands, Vayevarchem. And you know what it says there? Vayisa Ahron et Yadav, Vayevarchem. He lifts his hands. It says Yadav. We read it Yud Daled Yud Vav, but it's written Yud Daled Vav, Yado, in the singular. There's what's called a Kriyan Aktiv, a reading and a tradition of how we're supposed to read it, a writing and how we're supposed to read it. So it's written in singular, Yado, but it's read in plural, Yadav. How do you do that? You know how you do that? By putting your fingers together like this. I just made 5 fingers. I'm using 2 hands, but I have 5 fingers. Because a Yad has 5 fingers. So here I have Yadav and Yado. It's a very interesting gimmick. And, many of us don't look at the Kohanim, but the Kohanim, have you ever seen matzevot of Kohanim, where sometimes the hands are engraved on the matzeva of the Kohen, of the symbol of Birkat Kohanim? The Rambam doesn't have that. The Rambam believes the Birkat Kohanim is like this, spread out, but the minhag is to do it like this. It's a Kabbalistic idea, but to catch the Yado and Yadav. And Rashi says, which bracha did Aaron give? Yivrechacha, Ya'er, and Yisa. Now, that's Rashi. Ramban happens to argue with that on Rashi, but Rashi believes this is another example of Birkat Kohanim. So you already have 2, Parshat Naso, Parshat Shmini, and then now we're going to have to scratch our heads even deeper, because there are several midrashim that suggest other brachot in the Torah as being Birkat Kohanim. So here again, it's stretching it, but if you work with the world of Medrash, you can possibly say that the Birkat Kohanim is Mishuleshet BaTorah, mentioned 3 times in the Chumash, even though it's far from being obvious. So the better reading most probably is Elokeinu Elokei, Barcheinu Barbracha Hamshuleshet. Read the triple-edged bracha. Where do we know about that? BaTorah Haktuva Yedei Moshe Avdecha. Now, what would cause someone to read it otherwise, Hamshuleshet BaTorah? Everybody should agree that it's Mishuleshet. Not really. In the Beit HaMikdash, the Rambam says it was not a bracha Mishuleshet, but it was a run-on bracha. That's a shir in itself. What does that mean? That they didn't answer anything after Amen, after Yishmerecha V'Chuneka. You were in the middle of a bracha. The Rambam believed that there are differences in Birkat Kohanim in Beit HaMikdash than in outside Beit HaMikdash, and it's not necessarily a bracha Mishuleshet. So you have the 2 readings, Moshe's BaTorah. I would contend that from a poetic point of view, the wrong reading is the right reading. Because I think the right reading is Elokeinu Elokei, Barcheinu Barbracha Hamshuleshet, comma, BaTorah Haktuva Yedei Moshe Avdecha. It doesn't read well from a rhyme and a tempo point of view. Barcheinu Barbracha Hamshuleshet BaTorah Haktuva Yedei Moshe Avdecha Ha'amura Mepirana. It reads a little bit better like that. But all right, and that's similar to, if you look at a few lines down, where it says, Moshe uvnei Yisrael lecha anu shira b'simcha rabba v'amru chulam mi chamocha at Ma'ariv. So most people, most chazanim, will do Moshe Bnei Yisrael Lachanu Shira B'Simcha Rabba V'Amru Chulam B'Simcha Rabba V'Amru Chulam. They'll put together. But in Yeshivat Har Etzion, there the Balei Diktuk says no. It's Lachanu Shira B'Simcha Rabba, comma V'Amru Chulam. It doesn't sit with the we call the nusach, the music of the chazan, to do it that way. Like on Yom Tov night laning, no, even Friday night. Moshe Bnei Yisrael Lachanu Shira B'Simcha Rabba V'Amru Chulam. That's how we're brought up. That's how we said. But to go Moshe Bnei Yisrael Lachanu Shira B'Simcha Rabba V'Amru, it's like you're grabbing these two words, or Yom Tov davening. U'machuto v'ratzon kibu aleihem Moshe Bnei Yisrael Lachanu Shira B'Simcha Rabba V'Amru Chulam. It doesn't sit. Machuto v'ratzon kibu aleihem Moshe Bnei Yisrael Lachanu Shira B'Simcha Rabba V'Amru Chulam. That's the way most Balei Tefillah will do it. Right, it makes sense that Lachanu Shira B'Simcha Rabba. Right, V'Amru Chulam should be separate. Correct. V'Amru Chulam should be separate. Should be. And what did they say? They said V'Amru Chulam Mi Chamocha B'Elim Hashem. Right. So here you have a correction in the comma, and some Siddurim have it this way, some Siddurim have it that way. Let's look at source number 8. Source number 7, right after source number 7, I have a little paragraph. It says, Shinui Nusach B'Birkat Yotzei Or. How do we say this? Do we say, Lagdish Yotzram B'Nachat Ruach B'Safa V'Ura U'V'Ne'ima, comma, Kedusha Kulam Ke'echad? Or do we say, Lagdish Yotzram B'Nachat Ruach B'Safa V'Ura U'V'Ne'ima Kedosha? Well, is Kedusha a noun or is it an adjective? Is it something new? Kedusha kulam ke'echad. The Malachim said Kedusha. Kedusha is a headline. Kedusha, kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. Or is it b'safa v'ura, in clear language, uvene'ima kedosha, with holy or spiritual melody? How do you say it? Well, if you look at the various Siddurim, you're going to get both ways. Now, I know people who say uvene'ima kedosha, and they said this is correct, the only way to do it. Now, it's correct, but it's not the only way to do it, and I'll prove it. If you look at Rashi, source number 8, Rashi in Yeshayahu Perek Vav, on the Psukim V'kara ze el ze, Rashi says, Notlim reshut ze leze mizeh, the Malachim take permission from each other. Shelo yakdim ha'echad, one shouldn't jump the gun. It's like a choir. They're all saying it together, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. V'yatchil v'yitchayev sreifa, if they would say it independently, they would get burnt up. Ela imkein patchu kulam ke'echad. And that's what we say in Yotzer Or, Kedusha kulam ke'echad onim. Rashi is now in his Perush, in his commentary on Yeshayahu, Perek Vav, slips and tells us this is Nusach Ashkenaz. Kedusha kulam ke'echad. And so too, in source number 9, in a responsum of one of the Geonim, Rav Natrunai Gaon, also says where it says it to the last 2 lines, Ubishem Rav Natrunai Gaon Zatzal Matzati Shomer B'Safa Bura B'Ne'ima U'B'Kedusha Kulam Ke'echad U'B'Kedusha Kulam Ke'echad. Again, the word Kedusha is a noun. It goes on the next phrase. And you see this clearly in Rashi and Rav Natrunai Gaon. So you have here actually two different versions. I'm just going to end with 2 themes of Chazal, of Hasidim, going against the digduk, the grammar, against the grammar. And both of them were said by the Eish Kodesh, who was known as Rav, he was from the Warsaw Ghetto, the famous Rav Shapiro, the Eish Kodesh, and he said the following, the Piacenza Rebbe. Let's just do the last one. We're not going to have time for the first one. The first one was Shlomo Kalbach made famous. Hazarim b'dima berina yikzoru, hazarim b'dima berina. That even the dima, the cries, can be done with song. Shlomo Kabach made a big to-do about this. Because the way you read the pasuk is Hazorim b'dima, those who sow the who work the ground with dima, with a lot of toil and cry, berina yiktoru, are going to reap it with song. But Shlomo is saying this as a Hasidic idea, Hazorim b'dima berina, that even the cry can also be berina. And the last one is the Peitzenta Rebbe. Gam ki elech begetz hamavet, even if we're standing seeing the shadow of death, lo ira ra, I won't fear the evil. Why? Ki ata imadi, you're holding my hand, you're with me. That doesn't mean there won't be evil, but you'll be able to somehow weather the storm with a Kadosh Baruch Hu at your side. But the Piatzenta read it differently. Gam ki elech begetz hamavet, even if I'm in the shadow of death, lo ira, I won't fear. But Ra, I feel terrible, ki ata imadi, that also you have to be in this mess with me. There's a concept called imo anochi b'tzara, that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is with us in the time of tzara. And the Piatzenta says, bad enough I have to be stuck in this mess. You too? You, a Kadosh Baruch Hu, have to be here with me? Ra, he said this in Yiddish, es tut mir schlecht, I feel horrible, ki ata imadi. That's an unbelievable, powerful thought. But that goes against the digduk. But that's okay. Like the Rebbe who said, Ba'alotcha with a chet. It's against, what are you studying digduk? Okay, next week we'll continue with something else. So now you know, when you look at the SIDDUR, get your grammar right.